What is going on, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about UFC Sacramento, Fluffy Hernandez versus Gregory Rodrigues. I'm going to be talking about every single fight that's going to be taking place on this card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event, giving my predictions for all of you guys. So, without wasting any more time, let's jump right into the video. So we start the card off with Shanil, Dyer, and Elise Reed. I mean, you just gotta go with Shanil Dyer on this one. Elise Reed, unless she's fighting absolute bottom feeder cans in the women's strawweight division, she's just kind of known for being a victim. Like, she got posterized by Denise Gomez, and before that she got choked out by Lupi Godinez. These aren't necessarily bad losses to have, but I think there's a clear difference between Elise Reed and someone who's actually half decent in the women's strawweight division. And I think that Shanil Dyer, you know, I know she's only beaten Ravina Oliveira, but if you look at the eye test, she looks pretty solid for the most part. And I think she's good enough to finish someone like Elise Reed, who has been finished by multiple opponents in the unranked sections of the women's strawweight division. So for that reason, you gotta go with Shanil Dyer to get the job done. I'm gonna say most likely by TKO. Alright, Elise Reed, like I said, she is victim-like, and she has been prone to getting dropped in the last couple of fights, so for that reason, just go with Shanil Dyer by round 1 or 2 TKO. We move on to Jackson McVey and Wes Schultz. Now, it's very interesting stylistically because you have one of the biggest victims on the ground in Jackson McVey taking on one of the biggest victims on the feet in Wes Schultz. And honestly, this is a real 50-50 fight, alright? Will Wes Schultz just twist up Jackson McVey like a pretzel, just like everyone else has who is half decent? Or will Jackson McVey just beat the crap out of Wes Schultz, just like everybody else who's half decent on the feet? A very interesting question, and honestly, I don't know who to pick. Matter of fact, I'm going to flip a coin for this, alright? If it lands on heads, I'm going to go with Jackson McVey, and if it lands on tails, I'm going to go with Wes Schultz. It landed on tails. I'm going to go with Wes Schultz. I don't really believe in him. I just think he's too much of a victim on the feet, but the coin has spoken, so let's go with Wes Schultz on this one by submission. Now we move on to Gage Young and Stan Dorsainvil. How do you pronounce this? Stan Dorsainvil? I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below how you pronounce this, if any of you guys know what this means. But yeah, I think I'm going to lean towards Stan over here. I know that Gage Young can be a tricky fight if you're like a primary grappler who doesn't have that much threat on the feet, but I've looked at Stan's record as well as some of his highlights. The guy can do it all here. He can strike, he can wrestle, he can submit. He's a very well-rounded fighter, and I just think that he also has the power advantage, which Gage Young, I think he can get punished for if he chooses to primarily strike on the feet. Because Gage Young, it's not like he has this eccentric striking style where a lot of people are overwhelmed by the awkwardness. It's not like he has the ability to throw a good front kick up the middle, keep distance, pop a jab here and there. Gage Young likes to throw hands, but his power just doesn't seem to be all there. And I think that Stan Dorsainvil, like, please, someone let me know how to pronounce this name. But yeah, Stan over here. I think he has the power to really take advantage of that, because if they go shot for shot, I think that Stan is going to deal a lot more damage. And on the ground, I've just seen Stan use more of an offensive capability. Like, I know that Gage Young, he's a little bit hard to take down, and he's a little bit hard to submit, like Quillen Salkilled couldn't do so. But I think that Stan just has more offensive capabilities, so I'm much higher on him compared to Gage Young. So I'm going to take Stan by, I'm going to say by, finish. I think he's gonna TKO Gage Young. You know, if this goes 3 rounds, probably Gage Young wins this, because Stan has never really gone to a decision before, and I think Gage Young is more experienced in 3-round fights. But I don't think this is gonna go 3 rounds. I think that Stan is good enough to finish Gage Young, and I think that this will be the start of an impressive run in the lightweight division. We move on to Marcio Barbosa and Ryan Kuse. I've never seen Ryan Kuse fight, but just looking at his record, losing to Cameron Smotherman is just unforgivable, especially because you're a featherweight now. And unfortunately for you, you are taking on Marcio Barbosa, one of the most dangerous guys in the unranked sections of the featherweight division. Like, the way Marcio Barbosa got his TKO over Dennis Bajuka, let's just say that was absolutely filthy to watch live. And I think that Marcio Barbosa can produce something similar against the guy who lost to Cameron Smotherman on the regional scene. Cameron Smotherman is a negative record fighter who fought at bantamweight. How are you losing to Cameron Smotherman? I don't understand that. But yeah, regardless though, I'm going to go with Marcio Barbosa simply because I don't think he's going to lose to Cameron Smotherman. He's probably going to knock him out in the first round because Cameron Smotherman isn't even in the featherweight division. So for that reason, just go with Marcio Barbosa, getting another highlight reel KO over some guy that debatably shouldn't even be in the UFC, but for some reason the UFC decided to bring him along for this fight. Moving on to Nasrat Haqparast and Chris Padilla. I'm going with Chris Padilla here. Like, I'm going to be real with y'all. I think Nasrat Haqparast might be one of the most overrated fighters on the roster. Right? A lot of Nasrat Haqparast's wins are very controversial, to say the least. Like, I thought that Esteban Ribovic beat the crap out of him in rounds 1 and 3. And even before then, he arguably should have lost to Jared Gordon. And I know that Nasrat Haqparast, for the most part, is like, oh, he has clean hands, oh, he's pretty fun. But it's like, you're taking the guys who you even clearly beat to a close decision, like Landon Quinones. I forgot the other guy Nasrat Haqparast beat earlier in his career. But, like, Nasrat Haqparast, he's gone to a lot of decisions where they're very close. Half of them he shouldn't have won in the first place. And he's also coming off a TKO loss to Quillen Salkilled. I just don't think that Nasrat Haqparast is as good as the UFC hoping to me. Whereas Chris Padilla, on the other hand, I know he got a draw against Marquel Mederos. I don't know how he didn't win that fight. Chris Padilla should have won that fight against Marquel Mederos. And it was a travesty to watch the judges score a draw for that fight, which doesn't even make any sense because Chris Padilla clearly won 2 rounds. So I'm going to go with Chris Padilla to get the job done. I've been more impressed with his striking as well. I think he knows how to mix it up a lot better. Nasrat Haqparast is a guy that just likes to box, but we've seen a lot of guys being able to overwhelm him with kicks. I wouldn't even be shocked if Chris Padilla decides to shoot for takedowns here because Nasrat Haqparast, his takedown defense is, like, all right, but once he gets to the ground, I don't think he's really been tested in that area. There's just more options for Chris Padilla to win this fight, whether it be through the boxing, through the kicks, or even through the grappling if he wants to, than for Nasrat Haqparast, who has to use his hands in order to make a fight competitive. And even if he makes it competitive, I don't think he's all that good. I really don't, because he should have beaten someone like Jared Gordon a lot more clearly otherwise. All right, we've seen Jared Gordon get submitted by Jim Miller in the first round later on. So I'm going to go with Chris Padilla to beat Nasrat Haqparast. I'm going to say by TKO. Yeah, I think Chris Padilla is a smart fighter that can find a shot against someone like Nasrat Haqparast, who we've kind of just seen him get sent to the Shadow Realm by Quillen Salkilled not that long ago. I think that Chris Padilla can produce something similar in the later rounds of the fight. So give me Chris Padilla by round 2 or 3 TKO. We move on to Shamil the Blob Gaziev and Kennedy Nzechukwu. Now, I'm going to be real with y'all. I think that Kennedy Nzechukwu is awful. Alright, straight up. Alright, call me a hater if you want, but the fact that he took Marcus Buchecha to a draw in his last fight is just simply disgusting. Alright, Marcus Buchecha might arguably be one of the worst heavyweights on the roster, and that was looked at as a fight for Kennedy Nzechukwu to make an easy comeback, because let's be real here, on the feet, Marcus Buchecha is a complete victim. Yet here's Kennedy Nzechukwu taking it to life or death and arguably losing the fight. You know, realistically, like, Kennedy Nzechukwu didn't do all that much. So I'm going to go with Shamil Gaziev. I know that he's a plotty plotster who is obese, But at least Shamil Gaziev carries some power in his hands. He does have the option to grapple in this fight because it's Kennedy Nzechukwu. Anybody can take down Kennedy Nzechukwu in the heavyweight division. And I also think that if the fight gets tough, at least Shamil Gaziev will be able to push through. I've seen Kennedy Nzechukwu quit against like 42-year-old OSP. Like, I don't think that Kennedy Nzechukwu should belong in the UFC at this point. So, give me Shamil the Blob Gaziev to get the job done. I don't think he's going to get immediately finished like Fat Man Chris Barnett. Right? Like, I think there's a level difference between Shamil Gaziev and Chris Barnett. So, give me Shamil the Blob Gaziev to get the job done. I'm going to say by decision, where he blobs on top of Kennedy Nzechukwu, takes him down using his wrestling, and just make it a very grimy fight over the course of 3 rounds. And the title walk is going to be back for Shamil the Blob Gaziev here, ladies and gentlemen. We move on to Jammall, Emmers, and Leeryan Douglas here. I'm going with Leeryan Douglas. I was super impressed with how he looked against Julian Erosa in his debut. And yes, I know it's Julian Erosa who has been victimized multiple points in his career at this point. But the way Leeryan Douglas threw his hands against Julian Douglas, like, that shit was so crisp and clean. Leeryan Douglas kind of reminds me of a fighting nerd's style version of Ilia Topuria, alright? Like, I don't know how his grappling's gonna hold up, and defensively, he hasn't really been tested there, but in terms of power and offense, just the way he throws his shots is just so crisp to watch, and I think that you have to be really defensively responsible in order to beat someone like Leeryan Douglas if you're a primary striker. Alright, now I understand that Jammall Emmers has the ability to wrestle, but let's be honest here, on the feet, he's kind of a victim, right? Getting TKO by Nate the Train Landwehr. At this point, it just doesn't look all that great. And outside of that, I don't really remember any of his good wins. And I think that, I don't really see Jammall Emmers taking down Leeryan Douglas and subbing him immediately. Alright, it's been a while since we've seen that out of Jammall Emmers, so give me Leeryan Douglas. I think he's going to get another highlight reel KO, and I think it's time for Leeryan Douglas to really dip his toes against someone who's actually, like, near the rankings of the featherweight division, because he's 30 years old. Actually, no, 31. I'm sorry about that. It's not exactly old per se, but he does have to pick up the pace if he wants to make it to the top of the sport. So I'm going to say that Leeryan Douglas gets it done, and as long as he doesn't take any damage, hopefully he can turn around really quickly and he gets a step up in competition. Maybe against someone like, who would he fight? Maybe like a Brito if he comes off a loss. Maybe like a Pat Sabatini. I don't know. Somebody just outside of the rankings. I really want to see Leeryan Douglas compete at the top of this sport because I think he has a lot of power and that can go pretty far in the featherweight division. I mean, they just found Anthony Wint, another fat blob to crucify in the first round. Like, I don't know what you want me to say about this fight. Anthony Wint should win. The UFC clearly made this matchup for Anthony Wint to win. Terrance, Chatman, you know, I kind of briefly saw his image online, and let's just say, yeah, you are just a fat blob at the end of the day. I'm sorry, bro. Like, I understand that records and appearances might be deceiving, but there comes a point where you got to really ask yourself, you know, is the guy that looks like a professional athlete going to beat up a fat old man? And the answer is usually pretty simple. And yes, the athletic looking dude is going to beat up on the fat blob. So I don't think there's an exception to this. I think that Anthony Wint is just going to beat the crap out of Terrance Chatman over here. I don't see Terrance Chatman really doing all that well, because if he could, he would not be this fat and obese, and he would actually be looked at as a serious prospect in the heavyweight division. So I'm going to go with Anthony Wint to get the job done. We move on to Carli, Judice, and Jeisla Chavez. This, I think, is going to be a really close fight. And for once, we actually got, like, unranked women's fighters that are actually really solid to watch, all right? I am pretty high on both of these women. Carli Judice, her striking is very crisp. She knows how to pick her shots, and she knows how to keep her range at all times. Whereas Jeisla Chavez, I think she's shown a very well-rounded game. In her last fight against Eunice Dubin, she primarily took her down to the ground and just outworked her throughout 3 rounds. I am going to go with Carli Judice, though, simply because I think there's more upside. I think there's the knockout potential, which is really huge in women's MMA. I know that she couldn't TKO Juliana Miller in her last fight, but still, though, like, I think Carli Judice is a lot faster. I think she's a lot taller than Jeisla Chavez as well. And unless Jeisla Chavez can just easily ragdoll Carli Judice like what she did to other women, I don't think Carli Judice is going to be all that easy to work with because she's just going to keep range and just poke you with a bunch of shots that you're not really going to want to take head on. So give me Carli Judice to beat Jeisla Chavez. I'm never going to guarantee a TKO in women's MMA, but this is going to be the one fight where I'm going to say it's decision. But if it ends in a TKO by Carli Judice, I'm not going to be shocked whatsoever because we've seen Carli Judice get TKOs at multiple times in her UFC career so far. We move on to Marquel Mederos and Mason Jones. Now, Marquel Mederos, I know that he's like, what, an 11-1 prospect who has a bunch of wins. But let's be realistic here. Who are these wins against? Like Mark Shionsky? Austin Hubbard by split decision. Like, there's a lot of ugly wins on Marquel Mederos' record, and I don't think that any of those wins mean anything against someone like Mason Jones. Mason Jones is a dogfighter. If you leave it really close with this guy, he's probably going to outdog you in the later rounds and just beat the crap out of you. And the judges are going to score for Mason Jones because he's going to look like the guy who's advancing in throughout the majority parts of the fight. I think that Mason Jones is going to go out there, put on an absolute banger once again. You know, we are all Mason Jones fans on this channel over here, and I think he's going to get the job done, all right? I don't see him really finishing Marquel Mederos because not a lot of people have, but Marquel Mederos has just left too many fights close for my liking. I think that if he leaves it close with Mason Jones, he's going to leave with a bruised eye and arguably a busted lip and some orbital damage in his face. And I also see Mason Jones to be the much better grappler. Marquel Mederos, getting taken down by Austin Hubbard at multiple points in their fight. Not a great look. And even before then, who did he fight? I forget. Let me check real quick. He fought Austin Hubbard, Landon Quinones. He took Landon Quinones to a decision. Yeah, I'm going with Mason Jones. Yeah, Mason Jones is not taking Landon Quinones. And who's the other guy? Mark Shionsky, as well as Austin Hubbard. He's not taking those scrubs to a decision. All right, Mason Jones is finishing them within 2 rounds. So give me Mason Jones to just outdog Marquel Mederos in a firefight. This is going to be absolute fireworks. And honestly, this might be one of the most anticipated fights on this card, hands down. And I'm probably going to be more excited for this than a lot of the other fights that we're going to be talking about next. We move on to Reiner de Ridder and Roman Dolidze. You got to go with Reiner de Ridder here. Roman Dolidze is just a professional victim at this point. The guy can't strike, can't grapple, can't use cardio, can't really push a pace. I mean, what does Roman Dolidze even do? Other than beat up on Anthony Smith, which doesn't really even mean anything because it's Anthony Smith. I think that Reiner de Ridder, at least there's something special to him, and that being the grappling. I know that he's lost a couple of fights here and there now against Kyle Borrallo and Brendan Allen, but I don't think those are bad losses necessarily. And I think that Reiner de Ridder also, he is just way better of a grappler than someone like Roman Dolidze, who just primarily relies on people shooting dumb takedowns in order to get a job done. And even on the feet, you would think that Roman Dolidze would know how to strike after being in the UFC for 5 to 10 years now. But no, the guy just can't do anything outside of throwing an overhand right hand. And the only time he showed up as a half-decent striker was against, again, Anthony Smith. But, it doesn't mean anything because Anthony Smith is an absolute scrub. So give me Reiner de Ridder to just beat up Roman Dolidze. I think on the ground, Reiner de Ridder can push a more offensive pace. I think he's also stronger than Roman Dolidze. And also, on the feet, even, Reiner de Ridder, I know he's goofy and all that, but I think he carries more threat than Roman Dolidze. Roman Dolidze has never TKO'd anybody. Maybe outside of Phil Hawes. I forget when he did it, but I think outside of Phil Hawes, Roman Dolidze has never TKO'd anybody in the UFC fight, so give me Reiner de Ridder to get the job done. I'm going to say by, what would I say by? I don't think submitting Roman Dolidze is easy, though. I don't know if Reiner de Ridder is going to do that, but it's very hard. But I'm gonna go with Reiner de Ridder. I'm gonna say by decision. I think that Roman Dolidze, he's gonna survive all the bad grappling positions he's put in, and on the feet, I do know that he has an underrated chin, but Roman Dolidze just has no offensive capabilities that I rate whatsoever, so you just gotta go with RDR to win this fight in the goofiest way possible by just looking like a Looney Tunes character out there, but he should still win pretty convincingly nonetheless. We move on. We got Serghei Spivac versus Vitor Petrino. Now, I am very conflicted on this fight because every time I think about Spivac winning this potential fight, I'm picturing in my mind Jailton Almeida sliming him out with a 1-2 down the pipe and then following up with ground and pound shots. I don't care who you are in the heavyweight division. At no point should Jailton Almeida, of all people, be TKOing you. So that is a disgrace in itself. But then I think about Vitor Petrino's record. I'm like, yeah, he beat Steven Asplund and a couple of other guys in the heavyweight division, but he got choked out by Anthony Smith. Like Anthony Lionheart Smith, who's known for quitting if you just don't get immediately guillotined in the first few seconds of a fight. Vitor Petrino lost to that version of Anthony Smith. And I think that's even more unforgivable than getting TKO'd by Jailton Almeida. And low-key, Serghei Spivac, ever since that fight, I think he's improved. Like the Ante D'Elia fight, I was like, hold on now. Serghei Spivac's actually got some hands here. Right now, maybe Ante D'Elia is terrible, right? Which in hindsight, like I wouldn't be shocked. But I think that beating Ante D'Elia kind of erased some of the doubt I have for Serghei Spivac. So give me Serghei Spivac to beat Vitor Petrino. I think that he's a lot stronger in the clinch. I think that he will be able to use his trips if Vitor Petrino decides to stay in there for long periods of time. And on the feet, I know that Vitor Petrino has the power to knock a lot of people out, but in hindsight, though, getting a third-round victory over Thomas Peterson, not exactly the greatest look. Taking Asplund to a decision, it's not bad necessarily, but I think that Serghei Spivac has the option to grapple here against Vitor Petrino, who primarily just pulls guillotines if you try to take him down. So give me Serghei Spivac to get the job done. I'm going to say that he goes for a double leg. Vitor Petrino tries to latch up the guillotine, but then Serghei Spivac is one step ahead, and Yvonne Flew chokes him out in the first or second round of this fight. Last but not least, we got the main event between Fluffy Hernandez and Gregory Rodrigues, RoboCop himself. Now, I am very conflicted about this fight because when I first saw this being announced, I thought that Gregory Rodrigues is going to slime out Fluffy Hernandez. Gregory Rodrigues has way too much power, and his jiu-jitsu is good enough to defensively hold off against Fluffy Hernandez's onslaught pressure. And it only takes one shot from Gregory Rodrigues, whereas Fluffy Hernandez, he kind of has pillow hands, so he needs to overwhelm people and do a lot more work compared to Gregory Rodrigues. But the more I look at Gregory Rodriguez's past fights, I'm like, hang on a minute. A lot of these guys aren't getting colded out immediately. And we do know that Fluffy Hernandez does have a solid chin, to say the least. All right? I think that he is questionably weak to the body, but is RoboCop really going to mix in body shots all that well? Like, maybe a body kick here and there, but for the most part, Gregory Rodrigues just likes to throw nuclear hands down your pipe. And if he gets taken down, he likes to go full-on jiu-jitsu, right? I don't think that's a style that is going to effectively work against Fluffy Hernandez if the fight goes past the first and second round, right? Especially because it's a 5-round main event. If Fluffy Hernandez can survive the early storm, he is going to be able to take down Gregory Rodrigues, who is known for fatiguing past the first and second round of a fight. And I think he can just beat the crap out of Gregory Rodrigues in the later rounds by just taking him down, throwing a bunch of ground and pound shots. I think at first it's going to be really hard because of the strength difference, as well as Gregory Rodrigues' low-key underrated takedown defense in general. But we've seen Gregory Rodrigues not fold everybody up immediately in the first round. Fluffy Hernandez has a really durable chin that I don't think Greg Rodrigues is necessarily going to be prepared for. And I understand that the Bruno Ferreira fight happened and Gregory Rodrigues knocked him out early, but I don't think that Fluffy Hernandez, if he chooses to wrestle early on, I don't think he's going to have to be as worried about that because Rodrigues is going to be defensive on the ground. So give me Fluffy Hernandez to get the job done. I'm going to say by round 4 or 5 TKO, where he's going to be struggling early on, all right? If he lands a body kick on Dube, maybe Fluffy Hernandez is just starting to hunch over his body again. But if he makes it past the first round, which I do think is pretty likely, he's going to have a fun time against Gregory Rodrigues, who primarily just relies on his power. And I think that Fluffy Hernandez can just use his speed as well as his endurance to overwhelm and drown Gregory Rodrigues in the later rounds of this fight. Alright, that's going to be it for this video. Leave your comments down below what you guys think about this event, as well as your predictions for all of the important fights on this card. But otherwise, though, leave any comments for video suggestions you have for me. But outside of that, I will see you guys next time. Peace.